Okay, so we're
Okay.
back.
Okay. Okay. If we recall correctly, and before the interruption, I was speaking about the sovereignty or the, let's say, the illusion of the free will of the soul to take decision of where it wants to go and what's the experience they want to to have, or whether it is, from from my perspective, many souls are herded as a herd, as a sheep,
Hmm.
into a specific role, to be soldiers, to be slaves, um, to be harvested whatsoever, and manipulated and deceived into those roles as, quote unquote, okay, going into this suffering and torment, you will gain a spiritual growth. Okay, well, there might be, I accept there, you need to have some strife in order to evolve and to exercise your muscles, but you don't have to be in agony
That's
in order to
true.
evolve,
That's true.
right?
Um, it's never the soul's perspective, even on individualized and so forth, to enter any particular sequence of experiences or embodiment or anything of that nature,
Mm-hmm.
where as much as the beliefs feels that they have been harvested or gone against its own will of where it's going to go, it really doesn't quite work that way. There's always a certain part of discussion and so forth. For example, what people are understanding is that when there's a soul that says, okay, I know I need to express and experience all of this stuff. I need to learn this stuff, and I know we're one, we're the whole, and this is
Mm-hmm.
benefiting all the whole. And it says, okay, it agrees upon taking on a certain excursion, taking on a certain physicality, and at that point in time, it doesn't have the same level of judgment. It doesn't have the same level of whatever it's experiencing, what we experience on a physical perspective and on a program perspective. It's a little bit more easygoing. Because one thing I can tell you, if you meditate and you connect with your higher self and you want to take a look at something very dramatic, very powerful, from a human perspective, from an entity perspective, and even from the limited soul perspective while you're having the experience. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So something is happening in your life. If you take the time, you quieten the mind, you truly connect with your soul and other aspects of yourself within the soul
Mm-hmm.
compartment. And then you look at the situation that is so dramatic, so powerful, so painful, so dramatic. When you look at that from that viewpoint, you will notice that what seemed to be phenomenal, what seemed to be so impossible, what seemed to be so intense, and what you can call, like you said, suffering or torture or anything of that nature, it sees it completely different. And not only that, it doesn't see it in the same density and the same perception because it doesn't have the same programs and conditioning as a filter of how it looks at it. However, even in saying that, when you're looking at it, it also opens up other possibilities of how to shift that. Like you said, the Holocaustic thing. So you're in that particular situation. From a mind
Mm-hmm.
perspective, from an entity perspective, from even the soul perspective at that time, when you're not totally engaged with it, sees that as we have no choice. We are being, tortured, suffered, whatever, whatever the scenario
Mm-hmm.
is at the time. I really don't have a way out because there are other aspects. And at that point, you don't even see other aspects of you. You basically see other soldiers, other dictators, other, people that are controlling your life, right? So, in essence,
Right.
from that viewpoint, you feel limited. Now, you may be going through a situation where you're not be able to tap into that at a point in time, but if you did take the time and to meditate, or even quiet the mind and connect with your higher self from that point, now you're looking at it and say, okay, I'm at a concentration camp or whatever you want to call it. I'm here, and there's these Germans that are dictating what we do, don't do, what we wear, we don't wear, what we can eat, what we can't eat, what if we live or we die, or anything of that nature.
Mhm.
We have all this dictation going on. And from that other perspective, uh, I'm a victim at this point to their whims, their rules. I have no rules. I have no free. I have no sovereignty. I
Mhm.
have no free
Mhm.
will at this point because I'm here, right? But when you're tapping on when you're tapping on a soul level, and you're now tapping into that, and you may be asking other souls of yourself, higher self, and saying, okay, what are we here to learn? What are we here to experience? What are we to do? Whatever. Do we need to have this any longer? Now, then say it's not required any longer. Because you have to understand the soul, say a body gets out of commission. For example, say somebody tortures somebody and they die. Physically, they
Mhm.
die. Entity's free, the soul's free. That does not happen because somebody dictated it. That happens through the assistance of a dictator. But the soul said, yeah, I'm done with this. So, for example, even if you take the Holocaust, all the souls are left is saying, okay, we're done with that. But when we leave a mark, we leave a pattern, we leave something intensely for a human perspective that in one way or another is going to benefit. But the soul says, okay, I'm done with that experience. Yeah, I'm good with leaving, you know, dying, whatever you want to call it. Leave that physicality because the soul never dies, the soul never ends. But, I'll leave that physicality. But say yourself, and
Mhm.
you're in that particular experience, and you're not tapping into your soul and say, okay, you know, we're not we're not done with this experience. I'm not, needing to leave. I can do a lot more here, and I have certain things that I came in with agenda to do. So how
Mhm.
can I actually exercise my next level of freedom or choice or what we call sovereignty or whatever you want to call it, so that I can actually shift this? And then all these other possibilities happen. Not only your realization at a soul perspective, but also now you can now have a different level of communication with the souls. For example, say you're surrounded by soldiers that are pushing you around, and you've come from a soul level saying, I don't need this anymore. I'm done with this. And you're not done because you dislike it. You're just basically done with the experience. You will have a soul to soul communication with the soldiers saying, okay, thank you for playing that part. I am done with my part of experience. Is there anything I can assist you with? Am I done with your part of the experience? So say it's done. You've come to the point, the agreement that we're
Mhm.
done. We no longer have to play any of this. So the next level that occurs is saying, okay, we don't have to play the victimizer role. You don't have to be the victim anymore. We can change this. So you give instructions. We're going to do it this way. You're going to realize that I have this gift and that I would be better being, sent to another camp. And then in that camp, there's no torture. There is no whatever. We're being cared for, whatever it is. And they say, okay, great, fine. So now the next day or the day or shortly afterwards, these soldiers come up and say, oh, listen, David, um, we want to move you to another camp, and you're going to play this particular role in that camp. So we're making arrangements for you to leave, and all of a
Okay.
sudden you're leaving. And
Okay. Le-
yes,
I understand it. Your answer is actually saying it's a different perspective that the soul has and the personality has, or the entity has, right? But my difficulty, and maybe it's not answerable, okay? What are the attributes that really interest the, let's say, the soul on that level? Say, okay, I'm checking out. Uh, as we know, let's say in religious in all religions, the highest sin of all is committing suicide. You must, let's say, stay and commit and and uh, uh, and serve till you are permitted to leave. While let's say the ultimate decision is to have a suicide, as a, let's say as a personal choice. Let's say I don't enjoy this life. I think that as not at the soul level or the personal level, maybe I don't see any way out, so I kill myself,
Mm-hmm.
or create an event I will be killed.
Mm-hmm.
Say, let's say eaten by wild animals, or burnt or eliminated in a battle fight, so forth. But people can do that. The point is that the soul, uh, is it really a free will of the soul? Say, okay, he can check out whenever he wants. Let's say the soul says, okay, I'm Dudi, and I'm now in Israel, and I have to play this role, and in a family, in the nation, and so forth. But let's say Dudi, the personality, say, uh, I don't think so. I want out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So what are the implications for the
Well,
soul and for the entity?
yes, that's when there's a level of communication that is established and say, okay, what is your desire at this point in time to leave? What, okay, you don't like this experience. What don't you like about the experience? What can we shift about the experience? There is that communication that steps in where
Mm-hmm.
the soul and also entity and ego mind start to communicate. And this is a good example. I'm glad you brought that up because I've noticed that even in my own personal experience, but also because we may have certain perceptions or belief systems or viewpoints from a entity or even soul perspective saying, you know, I don't need this or whatever it is, I'm done with this experience and so forth. But the
Mm-hmm.
soul says, okay, you know, but we need to be here and do what we need to do.
It's
And
not yourself. It's about the service to other souls that you need
correct,
to,
correct.
to
But, you
fulfill.
know, the reminder that comes up is also the entity, for example, and says, okay, what did you decide and agree upon, and do you feel that that part is done? Because the entity communicates with the over entity, or what we call the collective entity. So there is support. It's not like separate. The same thing with the ego mind is basically now getting input from both resources, and there's a lot more background communication. So someone leaving, for example, committing suicide, it is a mutual agreement. Now, for example, say the soul turns around and says, well, I don't want to leave, but the physicality is compromised. The entity is saying, yeah, I'm done with this. And the ego mind just basically just says, I'm fed up with this. Then the soul has the freedom to say, okay, you guys carry on with whatever you want to do. I will leave, and I'll look for another physicality to either drop in or another physicality to reincarnate with or whatever it is. That's fine.
Mm-hmm.
And the physicality will go. Now it could work the other way around too. That's why I want to bring the other part. Say the
Mm-hmm.
soul says, "I'm done with my job," but the entity and the mind physicality says, "Oh no, we're still we're still in, here for this, and we're not planning to leave." So the soul says, "Okay, then I will leave, and I will go in non-form, and the physicality and entity stays still as a viable vehicle and whatever." So then it opens itself up for another soul to come in, and then another soul will be in line waiting to say, okay, let me look at this. Oh, this would be perfect scenario for me because, and of course it will still have communications with your mind. It will have a communication with your entity. It will have communication with brothers and sisters or whoever is involved to some degree, and say, I'm going to come in. But of course, the soul has a different personality too, to a certain degree. A certain agenda, has a different agenda, or may have something similar, but not totally identical. So in essence, it's going to say, well, I'm going to start navigating the body this way, or communicating from this point, and shifting certain parts of it. So that occurs. So it can go either way. And even an entity, normally entities don't just quite leave, but an entity may say, okay, I'm done with this, and may leave. Another entity can come in. So there are different facets. uh, it's not like sometimes people get caught up in this, and I had to look at it myself, because I started questioning it myself too, to look at it and say, okay, let me take a closer look at really what's happening. So I had to have communications with all the different levels, not only on a
Mhm.
personal level, but I started having the
Yes.
communication with others through that,
Yes.
to kind of see how this dance happens. Plus, you get to talk to the guides, you get to talk to the oversouls, you get to see all the levels of communication that occurs, the communication, the decisions, the directives that come about. So there's many, many, many things that happen before. And this is why when people say, well, can just an accident happen and then all of a sudden the body gets destroyed, and there is um, no recourse from it, and then the soul's out, the entity's out, the physicality, of course, is out of the equation. Can that actually happen? I've yet to see it. I've had communications with many that have left the planet.
Mhm.
Uh, I have talked to their entities when they were no longer in the body. I've talked to the collective entities. I've talked to the soul. I've talked to the collective oversoul. And all of it, to some degree, is always orchestrated way in advance with a certain timing and a certain alignment, so nothing happens. So even the soul of, say, mom and dad, and your brothers and sisters, and other family members, and you at that point decide suicide is the way out. The soul benefits from it, the entity benefits from it, the body kind of benefits with it, but it doesn't stop just there. There's a communication with mom and dad. Oh, if I leave this way, because I want to make something very clear, and I learned this quite a few years ago actually, because I started looking in that, and I thought, okay, what happens to suicide versus murder versus an accident versus the different options of exiting the planet? Where's the value in that?
Mhm.
Who
Mhm.
decides?
Excellent.
How does all this work? Right? So I
Mhm.
started looking at that. Then I started looking at and having communications with souls. And I started having communication with bodies and entities. And I started having communications with all the different structures that come about. And this is what I came up with. This is what crystallized in that point.
Yes.
The soul exit point does not really overly matter at all. In fact, how it leaves, if it's suicide, if it's an accident, if it's whatever, it's not totally saying, oh, I'm going to leave this way because this one's better than this one. There is a certain advantage it gets out of one versus another to a certain degree on an experiential level, but it's not a main directive. On an entity level, it also has certain benefits from one exit point to a next. Same thing with the mind. So when a soul wants to leave, it leaves the choice to the body and the entity and other souls. I'm going to leave. How can I be best of service? Now, if I'm going to try to keep this on track. In my mind, it always works so fast because I see so many different levels of it.
Mhm.
So say that the soul says, I'm done. And the
Mhm.
physicality and so forth, the entity says, we're done too. Okay. We don't need to be here anymore. So, because like I said, the example before, if the soul wants to leave and the rest wants to stay, another soul can drop in. Vice versa, vice whatever. But in this case, all of it wants to leave. Now it says, how? How do we leave? We can have sickness. We can have accident. We can be murdered. We can suicidal. Do
Mhm.
suicide. We have all these options. I mean, we have quite a few options.
Mhm.
So now it says, okay, if we're going to leave, what is the most of highest service that I can utilize here for not only ourselves, but all our beautiful partners that we have? Okay. So
Okay.
your soul will have a communication with your parents. Say, listen, if I leave this way, what level of structure or intensity, what buttons will I push? What old programs will come up for you best?
Yeah. What's the
So,
drama?
yes,
Yeah.
because the drama of an accident is very different than the drama of an illness,
Mm-hmm.
the drama of a suicide.
Yes.
Because suicide can bring up lots of levels of failure and all this other situation. And because now, for example, say your parents, someone in your family commits suicide, say one of your siblings or yourself. Wow, your parents are still alive and they're looking at that and they go, what did we do wrong? Where could we have stepped? How could I have missed
Mm-hmm.
the signs? Oh, I wasn't there for David or Judy or whatever the same way. Or, it creates a lot of intense
Mm-hmm.
activations of programs versus you got sick and you died. That creates its own level of drama, but it's very different because now it blames, say, cancer or it blames the medical system or it blames something
Yes.
else, right? Now, if you got an accident, for example, you had a car crash, and now they'll blame the driver or God for having this accident happen or whatever. It comes up with a lot of different things. So it's a whole different scenario that takes place. So
I understand.
when it looks all of that, it says, okay, how the exit, there's my learning, but how can I serve everyone that we have agreements with? And that's how it chooses the exit point.
Okay. So the service to others is the choice point. What is
Correct.
the best service to others is the choice point.
Yes.
Okay.
Now,
Okay.
there's one part to that before you carry on. The choice point it makes to serve to others also serves them, serves the individualized soul, individualized
Mm-hmm.
entity, and so forth, because they all benefit. Everybody benefits from it. And remember, at those levels, there's still an understanding, even though it may be clouded over. There's an understanding that we're all one. Whatever we serve to others, we're serving to ourselves. Okay, take it on.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Um, in one of the sentences, you said the soul's personality,
Mhm.
and that really kind of triggered me. Hmm. I thought that personality is attribute of the entity, the ego.
Right.
Do souls have personality? What happens in personality? What comes out of personality, and what are the attributes or that differentiate souls? Let's say I can say that I consider myself very inquisitive and very curious,
Mhm.
and sometimes too much. But um, I don't know whether it is soul or characteristic that I developed as a child in order to distinguish myself from the others.
So if you asked yourself right now, if you tapped into yourself right now, ask
Mhm.
your higher self, is that inquisitive aspect of myself solely soul directed, or is it more the characteristic that's coming from entity or mind? If you
I
tap
believe
into,
it's I believe it's entity, it's personality that I was encouraged by my parents to be more inquisitive and to differentiate myself and preserve this curiosity from the others. And I believe that um, what is characteristic of the soul is being innovative.
correct, innovative, and also to push the parameters so that further collective advancement takes place at an understanding level as the beingness that you are, so the two align. So there is that part, like you're correct, there's the characteristics of curiosity, of wanting to know more, to differentiate, whatever, and it's all saying, okay, that serves very well because we want to explore beyond the human experience and we want to be able to
Mm-hmm.
tap into our essence while having the human experience more. So we're going to look at so-called spirituality, look at outside of that while we're in the physical form. So there's that. So that comes into the equation. The personality aspect of a soul level is more of a directive of this, what it wants to learn, expand, and do as part of it. So it says, okay, if, for example, in your case, the inquisitive part was, okay, yes, that will be very instrumental not to get caught up in the typical automatic default of following the crowd, of being the
Mm-hmm.
same as others on a human perspective. Yes, I can utilize that. So it brings in that extra level of curiosity, that extra level of exploration, that extra level of push coming from a heart level to look for more, to connect with more, to be able to have conversations with others that are playing with that. So there, that comes from this, and also comes from the entity part and the mind part. So you're seeing how all of those are coming into the equation. So it's not just one part. Because, for example, if it's just entity directive, it's going to be more analytical with, tapping into the wisdom of a spiritual level to evolve itself. So it will be more human related, physical related, the
Mm-hmm.
human operational expansion.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to soul, it's more holistic, it's even bigger because it works hand in hand. So it's not only uh, advancing the mind and the entity, it's also advancing the soul. It's more
Mm-hmm.
enlightenment with the soul. So it becomes even more powerful because you feel all parts of it. And that's how you realize that all of them are working together. So the wording of characteristic may have not been totally in alignment. And when I say in alignment, um, the most descriptive word when it comes to the soul perspective, but that was the word I can come up with at the time.
Okay.
So in essence, it has its characteristics that it will take in and say, okay, you know something? I was a victim for several lives, and I have lots of experience in that. In this life, I would like to neutralize that and also experience. So it's going to bring a characteristic of a certain nature that would exploit that part of it, so that it would be able to create that shift at a soul level of a completion because it wants to complete
Mm-hmm.
one of the things off the list, right?
Okay. So in that regard, um, is there, let's say, a characteristics of um, souls that is really, really experienced with the drama on Earth? Rather, let's say, a soul that has a very rich experience in the Orion constellation, okay, which is kind of a draconian reptilian. So, and both are evolving and they all have own path.
Mm-hmm.
But as, let's say, each soul has kind of few thousands of or hundreds of thousands of millions of reincarnation, and it has some, let's say, alignment of the characteristics of a drama.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Okay? Um, if if we'll analyze our, let's say, our movies, dramas, they're always in the same patterns of drama, of love, hate, anger, and so forth, right? But if I will go, let's say, for let's say a reptilian society or other society where I don't have any clue of, they have different films, different drama,
Correct.
right? Is this kind of dramas, let's say, because I know currently I'm aware of human drama, but there be other drama, let's say beings that say have a lifespan of a few thousand years, they have different drama, different aspect and perspective of life,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Correct.
So my question in regard is this kind are these kind of let's say are these characteristics of the soul that where it's attracted to certain dramas more than others, or where its growth is most, let's say, the most, let's say, prominent, or I would say shaping to its choices. Because let's say in the age of 2 to 3 to 4, we are shaping our view of the world, and that's how we, let's say, shape our personality.
Mm-hmm.
Do souls have some kind of this kind of age that they shape personality?
They do. It's not similar 100%, but it does, yes. So you're going to have souls that will incarnate or take on physicalities on planet Earth that have had many, many, many lives on planet Earth, and which
Mm-hmm.
they would be more experienced to this level of frequency, these levels of drama, the pattern. So there are souls that actually continue to re-enter this
Mm-hmm.
playground within, and they're usually more experienced in playing the game, but they also carry challenges where they because they've been reincarnated so many times on this earth plane. I'm going to do something here because I meant to do this before.
Okay.
Okay. um, I've lost you for some reason.
Okay.
I'm not sure why.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes.
Okay. Okay. I can see you, but my video is frozen,
Okay.
but I can see you clearly and I hear you clearly. So the
Okay.
voice is okay. It's transmitting.
Okay. You've left, so I don't see you anymore. I just
No, I see the picture is frozen. My
Yes.
picture is
Okay. Okay. So I'll just continue anyways, and
okay.
I'm sure you'll kick back in at some point.
Okay.
Uh, so the scenario here in this regard. So you have the souls that keep coming back on planet Earth over and over and over
Mm-hmm.
and over and over
Yes.
again. Uh, Now, they, of course, at this point in time, are more experienced, but at the same time, they also will carry certain patterns that would automatically kind of fall back into the old patterns that planet Earth is playing. So uh, sometimes people say, well, we're being coming back over and over and over again, that we lose our sovereignty, we lose our freedom because we seem to be kind of always redirected back to planet Earth. That's not 100% true. It's only a little small portion of it.
Mm-hmm.
But in essence, those experiences that we keep coming back to is that, in essence, um, we feel at a soul perspective
Mm-hmm.
that it wants to accomplish what it wants to accomplish on this earth plane, and it will do its best to keep coming back. So is the planet made up of those type of souls? At one time, yes, more than any other time. It was never 100%, has never been 100%, but there are now the percentage is scattered all over the place, where there are souls that have been coming back over and over and over and over again, but
Mm-hmm.
that's a small number in comparison uh, to the amount of souls that have only been here a few times, souls that have never been here before, souls that have never even come in from the same galaxy or the same universe or the same, say solar system or whatever it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they're coming in here, and a lot of times they're labeled as new souls or
Yes.
souls that are less experienced. Now, a new soul would be a soul that has never, never taken on a human physicality. For example, it's from Source itself. And when we say Source from itself, it's all from the collective essence of what it is, and has never isolated itself as an individual soul per se. Didn't never
Mm-hmm.
got labeled with an individual signature, for example, and then go out and have experiences in different forms. Oh, you're back. See you again. So
Okay.
in
Yes.
in essence,
Yes.
uh,
I
I like
pick my nose.
I like when I can actually see you.
Yeah.
It seems
Me
like I'm
too.
not talking to anybody.
Yeah.
But anyways, uh, now I've lost track of what I was saying there. That last statement I
About
made.
about new souls
Yes.
having a new signature.
Yes,
Yes.
correct. So the ones that come in with a new signature, of course, they're considered as a brand new soul, and they're less experienced in the human perspective. So they still serve very much to come on the planet because they don't carry any, first of all, original agenda of finishing previous lives or previous
Hmm.
experiences. They have a closer connection to sourceness remembrance because they don't have
Hmm.
as many filters.
Yes.
The filters are lighter. They're not tainted by human experiences, so it's a little different. But when you're talking about souls that are coming from another universe or coming from another galaxy, or coming from another dimension, coming in from that,
Hmm.
they're also perceived to be different also when it's coming here, because in essence they may not have the same level of experience of of navigating through the human experience. So now it has to actually rely more on the entity and the human DNA codes.
Yes.
Or so it says, okay, I'm new here. I come here with a particular agenda. I come here with a certain frequency because, for example, you take a soul that has incarnated on many different levels. And when it comes here, of course, it has a whole different signature, has a whole different frequency range than
Hmm.
what has been on the planet. So they're going to feel different. They're going to feel very different here. Others will sense they're different,
Hmm.
and
Yes.
the individualized soul will feel out of water, out of its comfort zone, for example, if you want to even call that, out of its range of that it's coming. So they will come onto the planet, and they are now relying, like I said, with the entity and the mind, and also observing other souls on the planet, observing and communicating, saying, okay, can you give me some tips how to navigate here? Because I've never been here.
Yes.
At the same
Yes.
time, that particular soul actually creates such an expression or an experience, and also a knowing that it can share with other souls and say, oh, well, for example, the planet Earth, and when you have a soul that's been here, it gets a little bit more accustomed to polarity because polarity is very strong here, and or has been, and it has certain experiences that are really more experientially intensified on planet Earth. Now, say it's having a communication with a soul that has never been here before.
Yes.
So that soul says, oh, I don't understand the whole perspective of this polarization. I'm just giving you one example. Can you share that? But then it shares with the souls that have been here so many times in polarization that it actually forgets that, to a point, while informed, what it feels like not to be playing with polarization. So that particular soul that's never experienced starts to share how it feels like, oh, on other planets, we don't kill each other. On other planets, we don't have victimizers. Um, there is other options. There are other ways to play that, and we'll share different things with each other, and that will like create an advancement.
Hmm.
Now, the souls will come in from them different dimensions, different galaxies, different so forth, carry a different frequency too. That actually, what happens is, if you have only souls on planet Earth that are of a certain range of frequency, because it's been coming here so often,
Hmm.
it
Yes.
creates a cluster frequency that is harder to break out of unless it's moving very slowly because each one supports the other.
Yes.
So now all these inputs of souls that are coming from a different frequency starts to create. So for example, if you're in a room and you only had white light and black light as the only option,
Hmm.
you tend to say, okay, it's black or white. In fact, you almost don't differentiate it from one or the other as much. So now you
Hmm.
have all these other, somebody's introducing red and somebody's introducing yellow, green, purple, all
Hmm.
these other colors coming in. And it's like, whoa, what is that? You know, I didn't realize that there was even that there.
Yes.
And it starts to blend in as part of the reality. And this has
Yes.
been instrumental to advance the human experience, advance the planet, advance the souls that have been coming here as a soldiers coming in and
Mhm.
playing the game over and over again and so forth. Say,
Mhm.
okay, there's other options. There's other different things we can play with. And this is why we have so
Okay.
many now, indigo children that are, programmed or souls. We have crystalline, we have rainbow, we have star seeds, we have newbies, souls that are coming from different
Mhm.
source elements. We have so much variety. And then, of course, we have other ETs, coming in and that some have participated here and are coming back in. And when I say ET, they're coming in ET souls or
Mhm.
souls that have not been totally interactive with planet Earth are coming in. So we have all of these varieties, and that has accentuated the shifting of that cluster that was more
Mhm.
rigid. Now it's starting to fragment and starting to allow other inputs to come in, because before it becomes like a one channel or one range of channel.
Mhm.
Now more channels are coming in. It's like you living in a country where you only have one or two channels for your TV on your radio.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden there's an opening coming in, and now you're having 4, 5, 6, 10. Now, in North America, they have like 1,000 channels or something. I understand. I haven't seen it, but I've heard, or at least several hundred, anyways. Uh, so now you have much more variety. And
Mhm.
what happens, you feel, oh, let me take a look at this. Let me take a look at that. Let me take a look at this. And it kind of expands your viewpoint, so it advances the mind,
Mhm.
it advances the entity, and advances, of course, the souls that are decided to participate here. So you see how all
Uh-huh.
of that works.
Uh-huh. My video is frozen. Do you see it?
Yeah, I
How
see
do
you
you see?
frozen,
Okay.
and you have your
Okay.
eyes closed.
Yes. Um, with agreement, with an order of agreement. Uh, um, you said about new following your sentence about a new incoming unexperienced souls. Is there a lifetime or not lifetime, life cycle for um, for souls? I thought that the souls are infinite, and first question: are the number of souls is finite?
No, no, they're not.
Mm.
They What happens is that soul is all from source, okay, and it's all part of source. When it started off, there was a small amount of uh, souls that were creating realities.
Mm-hmm.
Then, of course, as the souls advanced, they basically started expanding and creating more realities. And then it was like, oh, okay, this gives more opportunity, more playgrounds, more opportunities to create more fragment or not, facets of ourselves. So let's create more souls. So more souls come from source that become signaturized and go out and play. And this will carry on and carry on and carry on and carry on until they expand to a certain point. And then at some point, it says, okay, we're now going to uh, decrease the amount of fragmented souls that are out there
Mm-hmm.
and start to unify. So if you look at source itself, what happens is you have its essence as one. Okay. As
Mm-hmm.
one, it starts to duplicate and triplicate and so forth and on and on and on. And when it duplicates and triplicates, those are the souls, for example. So you're going to
Okay.
create versions of itself with a slightly different signature so it can go out and experience another version of itself. And it continues
Mm-hmm.
to do that. And it creates more playgrounds, it creates more physicalities, it creates more variety, it creates more different signatures, and it goes on and on and on. Then at some point, it starts to collapse. It starts to not collapse, but combine. First of all, you get the fragmented souls that start to come together and you become unified. But eventually, it all combines back to no more having isolation, but it becomes the source as one unit. Now, say an individual soul goes out and says, okay, I'm coming out from source itself. And it's not isolated because of source itself, so the collective. essence of
Mm-hmm.
what it is. Says, okay, we're going to create this soul, and we're going to let this soul have a certain frequency, and it's going to go in and go and incarnate on, say, planet Earth, for example, because we're using that example. And Anelia Benz is one of them. You know, came straight from source, never had any
Mm-hmm.
lives before on any planet at all, never was a signaturized, never had any of those experiences. And it says, okay, I'm going to come from source and I'm going to go to planet Earth. Okay. I'm going to hold my duty, my agreement is to hold a certain frequency
Mm-hmm.
and to share some
Yes.
information, but also to assist others that are evolving and are going to be the soldiers or the foot. I don't like the word soldiers. Are going to be the playmates that are going to advance the collective. So she'll
Mm-hmm.
come in, and I say she
Mm-hmm.
because she took on a physical form because it was never a gender based by any means as original. So that particular soul came in. Now, once the job is done, that soul that's in an alien body turn around and say, okay, um, do I want to still agree to take on different forms, or just merge right back to source? So there's one less. So there was one
Mm-hmm.
added and one subtracted, per se. Now, in
Okay.
her case, her soul didn't even fragment. So, in
Okay.
essence, it's not even coming from a uh, what we call soul family. It's not even coming from an oversoul. It's not coming from a souls that split with similar signatures, like your twin soul, for example, right? It doesn't come from that. It came
Mm-hmm.
from one soul with one complete signature
Yes.
that did not fragment. So that happens. It's not very common, but it happens.
Okay. Yes.
So you could see all
Okay.
the different varieties. So it's not
Yes.
infinite, it's not finite, it's not because it can be infinite and it can be finite, but that's all directed along the way.
Um, my first thought is the metaphor of uh, a colony of microbes.
Hmm.
Okay, it's infinite. It can grow infinitely, right?
Yep.
But it is bounded. It's bounded by the physical condition it lives in.
Hmm.
Okay, and 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 when the microbes, let's say, expire, they contribute the essence, the biochemistry essence to the other elements in the colony, and so forth. And eventually, the colony, let's say, grow to be a tissue in something else. It could be, let's say, whatever. Okay? So, is this applicable? Is this example is it applicable to the, let's say, the number or let's say, growth, the life cycle of uh, of souls?
Absolutely, 100%. Great example because it's the macro with the micro, and it's all part and parcel, like you said, so the microbes, and it's exactly how it works, and that's actually a duplication even in the microbes of the chain of what happens through all the different expressions.
Mm-hmm.
It starts off as this, and then you see it at the next level, the next level, next level, and then of course we go right down to the microbes. But there's even more further levels than that occurs. But it's the same thing. Yes.
Okay. So so in that essence, and has a soul. What is the boundary of the soul? Is the soul, let's say, for each cell, to the organ, to let's say, to the whole body, or to this collection of bodies? Okay. You understand that's the question?
Not quite. Some of it because you broke up, but the other part of it I didn't.
Okay.
So I'll let you
Let's
explain it
say
again.
let's say if I'm part of a collective,
Hmm.
let's say, of my city or my municipality, okay, I have certain desires about maintaining the landscape and so forth, and maintaining the education and everything. And if I'm part of, let's say, of the Israeli collective, I have other desires and others concerns. And if I'm part of, let's say, of this family, I have other desires and so forth.
Correct.
So, but I'm still an individual, and I have very little, let's say, say or impact, let's say, on the municipality, and less, or let's say, on the national decision making or happening. So same thing with the cell in the body. Does the cell in the body has a uniqueness? Does it have a soul? Does it have a conscious? Because we know that everything has a conscious, because it's brought up by the one source,
Correct.
right?
Yes.
So is the single, let's say, a single nerve can do lots of damage and lots of, let's say, pain to me, right?
Yes.
But on the other hand, a cell on the nail or cell on the skin, I want, or on the intestine, I will not feel it. Okay, has no impact. Okay,
Well,
so
at first, yes.
does does the soul does the cell has a soul? Biological cell has a soul?
I wouldn't say it has a soul because it doesn't isolate it, but each cell is part of the collective. So each one is having its own little experience that affects the rest of it. So there is a consciousness. Absolutely, there's a consciousness within each of the cells, each part of the cell. And each cell still affects the whole regardless. Like you can say, well, what can I do to change the nation of Israel or to change the nation of that? You can by just not only your energy and so forth. It may not be so powerfully reflected. The same thing with the cell. You're saying on a nerve, of course, can cause pain and more sensorial because it's more directed to the sensorial aspect of it. But even on your hand, for example, or on the skin, for example, it still can play a role because it can start a little colony of deterioration or irritation or something of that nature along the way, which will, as it grows, it will affect. Now it can become a cancer cell, and then of course that goes down another path, right? So each cell, each aspect, excuse me, has the same capacity as what we would in wherever we are in our experience. So there is an overseeing consciousness to all of that, and an individualized consciousness within that aspect. So all of that plays a role. So there's similarities to all of it, from source all the way down to every little aspect of creation, because it's all in the same field. When you really look at it, some people say, well, where's source, where's God, where's any of that, right? And my answer,
Very good question.
my answer to that, and I'm sure some other people have expressed it, the correct question to ask, or the more appropriate question to ask, where is it not? Because in essence, any existence is part of source, or what we can call God, or whatever we want to call. It's like
Okay.
the field. That's where it's created. Without it, it can't create it. It's like going to the computer and saying, how did this pixel on the screen come
Yeah.
about?
These are the building blocks.
Yes.
Yes.
There's an instrument that makes that exist, and it to even be expressed or be even there, that pixel that makes up
Yeah.
a lot of other pixels that create a photograph or whatever, digits, whatever you want to call it. It's the same thing. So when people are asked at the same time saying, well, where is it? Where is it localized? And, of course, it's not localized anywhere. It's everywhere. And you're part of it. You're it. You're part of it. So it's not like, the other part of the question that came up there, Duty, is people say, well, I feel isolated from source and I want to go back home. I want to go back to being source. And I go, well, you are source and you're already in that field of source. You've just created the illusionary projection of
Mm-hmm.
being separate from it, but you're still there. You never left. You know, somebody had said a story once, which really explained it quite well. I'm hoping I can do some justice of how it was
Okay.
expressed because I heard it many, many, many years ago. Um, the thing was, it's like this. Many of us go into a dream state. We see that we're dreaming. You know, we're in
Mm-hmm.
this life and we feel that we're lost in the life. And here we are, and we're saying, okay, I'm looking for God. I'm looking for source. I'm looking for my essence of who I am. And the story goes that once you awaken, meaning you wake up from your dream state or from this projection, from any projection really, or holographic expression, you actually realize that you
Mm-hmm.
never left
Yes.
source or your
I
bed.
never left. I
Yes,
never left.
I want to wake up and I want to wake up. I want to go home. It's like, you know, that I don't know if you ever seen the movie Alice in no, what was it called? Not Alice in Wonderland. Um, where they had the Tin Man and the Straw Man and then,
Oz.
oh, the Planet of, yes, yes,
Yes.
yes. The Wizard of
The
Oz.
Wizard of
Thank you.
Oz.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Remember, I think her name was Dorothy. She was having all these things, and she met all these people, and she was on this other planet, and or this other reality, and she wanted to go home. I want to go home, you know, type of thing.
Mhm.
And when she actually woke up, she realized she still was in the bed and never left. And it's all like all of us. It's like I want to go back to source. Well, you never left source. You never left the essence of who you are, and you're going to wake up in that bed, sort of thing. That's just an analogy, right? You're going to wake up and realize, oh, wait a minute, I never left. I was just dreaming. I was just um, what can I call it? Using imagination, using creativity to express and experience other versions of something that I have never played with before. And you come to that realization, and uh, and then you. So the answer is to that, as I said before. The question is, you know, where is that localized source or localized God, whatever you want to call it? You're
Mhm.
there. You're it, basically. You're part of it all.
Okay, in that sense, if I'm part of God and I'm part of the One, there is still, I would say, in human collective, there's a personality um, to nations and to companies. I mean, corporate companies.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, are these also souls? Let's say I would say um, a corporate in pharma is a soul. A corporate, let's say in agriculture is a soul. A corporate in software is so on and so forth as a collective soul.
Well, it doesn't have its own separate soul for but it's still in the same platform of its creation, so it still exists
Mhm.
as source. It's just part of the creation within that source energy. But what I can explain to you with that is that the souls involved in that corporation make up the
Mhm.
corporation, first part, but the corporation becomes an entity. So you have
Oh,
the corporate entity,
I see.
okay?
Okay.
Because there are many entities that are participating to create that corporate entity, like pharma, whatever, you know, whatever it
Mhm.
is. So that, and then that entity works in a certain parameter of how that corporation works. And then of course the
Mhm.
participants of the souls that play in that are engaged in all of that too. So you see it's not separate in that regards. You know what people used to say, well, okay, there's this thing called Satan, there's this devil, whatever it is, or
Mhm.
there's, you know, these dark entities or energies and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
I said, this is how it works. If you have a group of people that decide that they're going to create a certain energy, within that energy, you create, like if there's a fear, an idea that there's a demon or a devil or a Satan or whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not talking about the other construct that exists of it being all part of one. But if we say we're going to give focus, like a religion gets together and says, okay, there's God and then there's the devil, for example.
Yes.
Yes. So the religion starts to create and propagate that particular idea. Starts off as an idea. Then other people join in and buy into the idea and support the idea, maybe even expand the idea.
Mm-hmm.
But the expansion comes in because there's a certain energy around that. So there's a fear, there's a judgment, there's a darkness or whatever, and it starts to create that energy. So what happens is you now create a cluster of energy relating to this devil, for example, and also an energy of this God.
Is
What
that
happens?
what's called? Is that what's called a thought form?
Yes, yes. It starts off as thought forms, and then that thought forms starts using the energy there and starts to create a field of thought
Mm-hmm.
forms. But that field now starts taking a form, and now it takes on an entity. So now
So
you have. Mhm.
when you say it takes an entity, so the thought forms is the entity, or the thought form is a place for another entity comes in.
No, the multitude of thought forms and the energies around that and the focal point of the different frequencies that come part of that will take out of that field and create an entity. Like even
Mm-hmm.
God, the Israel God or the Christian God or the Muslim God or all these other gods,
Mm-hmm.
there are all entities, and they are entities created by clusters. It's still within
Okay.
source, but it's not the source essence because it doesn't have all the different characteristics. Because you have to remember, entities come together or come into form based on the characteristics we project through our thought form. For
Mm-hmm.
example, the gods of the different religions all have certain characteristics that are applied to it, and
Mm-hmm.
that entity will express that. And when we pray or tap into those entities, we now download the form, the whatever, what's the word? I'm trying to think of the word to put in there. But the oh, I just lost it. But anyways, okay. So they can tap into the resource of that particular entity. And the same thing was the devil or the dark energies or the
Mm-hmm.
Satan or whatever it is. If you now, like for example, there's people that pray to gods, different gods, for example,
Yes.
because each one has its own entity and its own cluster.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have people that pray to a satanic ritual or whatever it is. So
Mm-hmm.
now you're tapping into that energy, that cluster, that entity there, and so you're now becoming one with it. So you're having communication back and forth to a certain degree, and your way of experiencing life now is tainted by whatever entity you're tapping into.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the entities are not, uh, how can I say, rigid to the sense it can evolve too. It can expand even more intensity in one way versus the other,
Mm-hmm.
and it
Yes.
can come and go too. So, in essence, if the say, for example, one particular religion decides to dissolve, okay?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So the two entities that were created, or three or 10 entities, whatever it was, unless you're Indian, because if you're from an India background, you can have 1,000 gods, so you have 1,000 entities, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So say a particular religion dissolves, and that
Yes.
particular what happens is those entities become free spirits. Now either they start to merge with another religion if it's beneficial, or it starts
Yes.
to dissolve. It stops to exist. It merges back to the collective entity, which
Okay.
basically is much more balanced, neutral, whatever. It doesn't have that form anymore. So it's like
So
this.
yes,
You
yes.
have dark and light. We've separated dark and light. Well, what does that mean? One, turns
Duality,
more.
duality, and the drama of duality.
Yes,
That's our experience in this planet.
correct, correct. So you see how those exist, and we created those separations and so forth. But once we start to merge and start to realize our essence, you have those coming together, and they start to dissolve, and all of it becomes the whole, a holistic, full spectrum rather than
Mhm.
isolated spectrums. And it's the same thing with an entity. It no longer is an isolated expression. It becomes more of the collective expression, and it emerges in that. So whatever energy it carried as an isolated pocket no
Yes.
longer exists because it becomes one with everything again of the field. And so, anyways, that's
So,
so
so
any
yes,
entity that
yes.
exists is all powered by the power we give to it.
So in essence, I see lots of similarity between what you describe as entity with an AI,
Correct.
artificial intelligence.
Mhm.
So maybe we are, as a biology, is in a different kind of AI. It's an entity,
Exactly. Good observation.
and we have lots of kinds of let's say biologies. We know we are on the carbon base, but there are other kinds of, let's say, we know of in silicon-based biology that exists on Earth, in which not it's interterrestrial, it's not extraterrestrial, and it's known by science as well.
Mhm.
So, so extending on this idea of AI and entities, um, what about, is this relevant also to the black magic and satanic rituals that are summoning entities? Are these real entities that kind of orphaned entities that were existed and let's say in the past are now looking for action or something like that?
Well, for an entity to exist, it needs to be supported, it needs to somehow. So for its existence, even if it was created 10,000 years ago, for example, for it to
Hmm.
exist, there must be something to support it, something that feeds off, and something that has been there to utilize it to some degree. So, so what you can call different rituals and whatever else have supported it and have been having that exchange. Once that terminates completely and there's no resources, then it dissolves. So it no longer stays as isolated. So when you're talking about satanic rituals, whatever whatever we want to call it, what are the rituals about? Is to summons that energy, but also to feed that energy and to become
Yes,
part of that energy, right? So it's there,
right.
right? It's in the field. It's like, for example, you can post something on YouTube unless somebody goes there and
Hmm.
observes it. Eventually, it becomes obsolete and it's no longer there. But if
Hmm.
people are interacting with it and downloading and then creating their own expressions within it and so forth, I mean, maybe that's not the best uh, explanation,
Hmm.
but it gives you a general idea that unless it's supported, like for example people say, well, look at all these, so-called elites and so-called organizations that are, playing with black magic, are playing with, satanic rituals, that are dominating the planet, that are,
Hmm.
taking away our free will, or, are dictating our systems and creating all these things. Uh, you know, why did they exist and why didn't they disappear? Why don't they actually leave the planet and so forth?
Because we support them, of course.
Exactly, exactly. We support
Okay.
them
And we
because
believe in the drama. We believe
correct,
and participate in the drama.
correct, correct. Because
But
the
what?
moment, Mhm,
Yeah,
go ahead.
but we look at the dark side, but there's also let's say a light side. If there are, let's say, negative, as we call them, negative or oppressive entities there should be also, let's say, supportive entities,
Mhm.
right?
Correct. Yes.
And are these exists, or are they unknown? Can we strengthen them? Should we work with them? Because following my spiritual belief, we should not. We should not play other way, not the light, not the dark.
Mhm.
We should go to the spiritual, to the source. Because these are drama, let's say the duality drama.
Mhm.
And as we evolve, we want to, I would say, collapse or merge the drama
Mhm.
and go forth.
Correct. Yeah, you'll find that dark and light actually, once they merge, and that's really from a polarity aspect, and once it merges, it becomes neutral, it becomes holistic, and it becomes all of it. It's not
Mm-hmm.
about, dissolving one's better than the other. Those are kind of things that, we have created as separatized entities, this whole idea, well, there's God that's good, and then we have the devil that's bad, or Satan, or black magic,
We
whatever
have,
we want to call it, right?
yes, angels and devils.
And angels and devils. Thank you. So
Yes.
those are polarity roles, and
Mm-hmm.
those angels and devils are both entities. So you have the
Mm-hmm.
angelic entities that are, kind of sharing one spectrum of polarity, and then you have the dark ones that are uh, doing the other spectrum of polarity. But once the need and the play and the
Mm-hmm.
power given to the polarities dissolve, then you'll see the angels and the devils actually merge, and then you'll see that even the form of entity doesn't exist any longer. It becomes that holistic component, right, of that
Mm-hmm.
sourceness that it is, right? Um,
But
yeah.
in
So.
essence,
Mhm.
in essence, any kind of worship is the feeding of those entities.
Correct. And this is the reason a lot of religious structures exist. And I hear this all the time. And yeah, I'm sure they do it there too. I'm not sure, but in North America, I mean, I'm talking about Canada when I've traveled to the States, and then I've traveled to other countries too.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you go by a church, or you go by some place of worship, and you say, "Come and join us and worship," right? And what
Mm-hmm.
you're doing is you're getting people together to give power to that entity, to give power to that energy to exist, to support itself. And then,
Mm-hmm.
how we reinforce polarity is that you worship one polarity to go against the other polarity. So if we
Yes.
worship God, God will destroy the devil, for example,
Mm-hmm.
or, like you said, the angel of the
Yes.
devil, right?
The
But
world
it's just,
drama.
yeah, so all you're doing is accentuating the polarities.
But that's how we are, let's say, programmed or educated, directed
Mhm.
into engaging in a fight.
Correct.
And as a children, we are, let's say, taught, in my experience, that we should fight our way.
Yes.
You fight your way to whatever you want to achieve. And I was brought that way, and I don't adhere to this notion that you have to fight your way to life. And one of the outcome of this, I told you about the drama that I had with teacher certificate course, is that I change my daily and routine of affirmations. I drop the drama.
Mhm.
I bless what I have, and I go with ease and with nachat. I say nachat, with comfort,
Right.
right?
Yep.
Which is absolutely the opposite of the way we are brought up. We are brought up to struggle and to strive. Whatever we want to get, if you strive and you put enough effort, you will gain. But we can gain and get a lot with comfort and ease.
Correct. Correct.
And now I'm working on myself in the last 6 months, and it's working dramatically. to be more relaxed and more accepting to life when you change your aspect to life from strife to relaxed and comforting.
Excellent.
And I believe this is also part of spiritual growth. I had to experience this drama, and in order to release it,
Correct. Correct.
right? And I'm very hopeful, and it's also part of my belief that this realization will spread, and people will abandon the strife way of life, which were brought up, because there is abundance, and there is sharing, which is much more, let's say, effective than competition.
Correct. Correct. And that's you framed it perfectly, because that's those realizations is exactly what is taking place. I mean, the most powerful state is not. I mean, the business model, and I'm sure you're probably familiar with this. The business model is that competition is good. Competition
Mhm.
brings new technologies to the forefront, and uh, and so forth. That's the model. However, I've always said that competition actually causes limits and
Mhm.
replication, and actually the strife, and it actually limits what we actually create. Because if we collaborated and we were looking at the whole for what was best, then whatever we created, even as technology or products or services or anything,
Mhm.
would be not polarized the way it is now, where you are creating something that has to be obsolete in a short period of
Mhm.
time so we can make more, so that we still stay in that, or that
Yes.
we have to make it cheaper, faster, better, this or that, without looking at the environmental implication, the implication of what's best for the human
Mhm.
physicality, the collective
Absolutely.
experience within each area, and so forth. So uh,
Absolutely.
yeah, so you could see how, because to me, when somebody said, "Oh, well, free enterprise is the best," and I said, "Well, it has very limited benefit to it
But
because
there is no free enterprise.
yes,
The-
exactly,
it was existing in our dreams, but it's never implemented.
correct, correct." And the thing, you look at all the systems that are in place and so forth, and all of it
Mhm.
is to support separation struggle and so forth. I mean, in essence, like you said, in competition, people are taking down each other and they're trying to be better than each other. But
Mhm.
are they being better? This is one of the things that people question. I had some people question me, well, yeah, aren't they making us better because it makes us more creative? We have to tap into more of our resources to come up with something better than somebody else. And I said, well, how does the energy feel for you when you're actually trying to always compete, when you're trying to be better than someone else? Does it actually
Mhm.
feel free to you, or does it feel actually more burdensome to you, and so forth, right? And
Mhm.
when they
Yes.
actually spend the time to reflect on that and say, wow, it's actually tiring. It's actually, and then of course, like you said, there's not the level of freedom, because are you looking at for something that's actually better, or are you looking at for something that is temporarily better, that is in some way
Mhm.
better enough that you can get it out there, but are you actually creating something that is really truly beneficial? Because one of the things I've pointed out to people is that look at what competition has brought. There's duplication, there's replication, there is obsolescence, there is
Mhm.
stuff
No,
that very poor
that's big.
quality.
The obsolescence and
Yes.
duplication
Hmm.
is is uh, is an outcome of greed,
Correct.
and not of competition. And greed is an outcome of the belief in scarcity.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct. Yes.
so with my understanding, there is let's say imaginary scarcity,
Hmm.
which is inducing um, no, no, what we said before, the competition. And the competition is the mechanism to produce hierarchy and to
Correct.
control people.
Yep.
Okay? If there will be no competition, there will be no hierarchy.
Yes, and even the idea of scarcity is manufactured. There is, like you were saying before, there is no such thing as scarcity. We've created a system that replicates or looks like scarcity. For example, people say, well, there's a shortage of money. But
Not really.
money was created as part of slavery, control, and so forth, and polarization and everything else. But look at it this way. The question is, well, there's a shortage of money. And I go, well, how is so? I mean, where's it come from? Isn't it just fabricated? Isn't it just digits on a computer? Isn't it just pieces of paper or coins or metal or whatever it is? And
Absolutely.
can't we make as much as we want whenever we want? We can decide how, because that's what we're doing in a sense. Somebody says, well, if we go in and make sure everybody has enough, then that will throw the balance out, and it's going to mess up the economy and so forth. And I said, well, how so? I mean, we already do that now. I said, look at it this way. If we look back 30 years ago, for example, how much money was in circulation compared to how much money is in circulation now? I said, where's the difference come in? Because there's like much more. Where did that come from? If there was sense of scarcity, there's only so much, why do we have 10 times as much now floating around and still playing scarcity game?
Yes.
Because you take, for example, in our country here, I mean, when my parents bought their first house, they paid $18,000. That house sells for $1.5 million now, for example. Of course, they don't exist anymore. The house is, somebody else has it, whatever, long gone. But say, well, look at everything else. We used to buy a loaf of bread for $5, 5 cents. Now it's several dollars, and if it's organic, it's $5 or whatever. Say, well, look at the price that's increased. Now, if we still had the same amount of money circulating of 30, 40, 50 years ago, could those prices go up? They couldn't. They couldn't, because we wouldn't have the money to circulate to have that to exist.
Yes.
So the price of that 5 cents piece loaf of bread will still have to be 5 cents, because that's all the money that was there. And whatever it is, it didn't appreciate in value, or it didn't, not that it appreciated in value. And actually it's in poorer quality than it used to be, because it's more chemicals than anything else. But that's besides the point. But in essence, unless we've just kept plugging in all this money. And I love, I mean, where people say, well, okay, yes, all right, you're right. We've been producing more money with debt. And I go, debt, what does that mean? You owe it to somebody, right? But who do you owe it to?
That's
Right?
slavery. Yes.
Because, in North America, or you say in the States, they have the Federal Reserve. There's an organization that governs
Yes,
how
I
much
know.
money is made, right? So
Central bank.
sorry?
Central bank.
Central bank, right?
Yes.
And that exists in most of every single country. I think there's only a few that don't have it, and it's like less than a handful. But every country has a central bank, right? And so the central bank issues all this money and whatever else. And the question is,
Invent.
where are they getting it
Invent
from?
out of thin air from the
Yeah,
thought forms.
exactly. There, and then, you have governments and organizations that are borrowing money from the central banks. So now we owe the central bank money that we borrowed with interest. And then the question comes in is, did they actually have it at first, or did they just create it out of thin air, give it to you, but you're now giving them back something that they never gave you in the first place? I mean, it was fictional anyways.
Okay,
But you're giving
I
it back
think.
with something else attached to it, because we put extra energy in it.
Okay, my more elaborate question is, why do we participate? Why do we participate from the first place?
Correct. Good question. The question is, why did we choose to participate, and why do we continue to participate? Because at one point we agreed to participate. But when I ask you or ask any individual as a child, do they have any idea of what money is, or that there's a structure, there's a system,
Mhm.
or anything of that nature? I can tell you, most will not even agree or even know what even that is. So we are taught that this is it, this is the system, and this is how we have to play. So you take a child that is completely, well, I wouldn't say completely, but greatly
Mhm.
an open platform that's come here to play and wants to experience life, wants to do all these other things. And then we have our parents that come in and start teaching them the ways of life. Then you have the
Mhm.
schools that teach the way of life. Then you have the
Yes.
media, you have the different levels, the governmental and others, that teach you the way of life, and you get taught to give power to this structure, system, money. But not only that, if you don't have it, if you don't abide to it, you will not only thrive, you will suffer and die. So
Okay.
we are conditioned and programmed to accept that, and then we follow through.
So these are entities actually, thought
Yes.
forms.
Yes, they
Okay.
are related to entities, to those thought
So,
forms. Exactly.
so in that case, um, how can we impact? I understand that we can starve the beast by not participating, but how can we impact?
Well, we're doing it right now. Even this conversation that we're doing right now, and other
Mhm.
conversations other people have had right now. And not only the conversation, but the realization, and then also in our thought forms changing so that we are not giving power to that. That's all feeding into the collective. And we are also creating disruptions. And this is the reason why some of these other entities, other forms of energies, and so forth have been very uh, attentive and observing of people that are breaking out of those boxes, out of those patterns, and creating a different wave of pattern to go out and say, well, we got to go and trigger them or target them to remove them or to actually bring them back into the system because they're going to dissolve the system. But that's only when we start off as isolated versions of
Mhm.
ourselves. But as we are doing this more collective, and this is why when we share this information, when we share this realization, when people are start connecting into it, because energetically we're creating an entity too.
Mhm.
And that entity is another entity that is actually, it's a cluster of information, a cluster of consciousness that that entity holds, that we are now, as more people start tapping into it and start coming to the realizations of what we were just talking about just a few minutes ago,
Mhm.
uh, then what happens is starts to starve the what you call the beast, or starve that entity, because that entity that exists, that is governing it right now, needs very low vibration. And this is why the entity in a way is in a panic state, because it says, okay, my existence is not going to exist, I'm going to have to merge soon enough if we don't have people feeding fear. And this is why you see the movies, you see television, you see the environment around you, the false
Mhm.
wars, the idea that we have to go to war, the ideas that we have enemies. We
Mhm.
create,
It fails.
these entities
It
from.
fails, but they fail one time after the other.
Correct.
In the last 3 years, I remember 3 attempts to start World War III. They
Yeah,
all failed.
correct.
And I remember 2 attempts to instigate massive plagues, epidemics,
Correct.
and they failed.
Correct.
Okay, that was, I believe, 2012 and 30 and 13, trying the epidemics. So it's not working.
Yeah, and they've been
On
putting.
one hand, on the other hand, uh, the truth comes out, but there are no implications. Okay, so people understand, and we understand that okay, how the system works, how the system is so ridiculous and let's say and exploitive. Okay, but nothing happens. Remember in the 1912 or 13, there was a social movement, Occupy, in New York.
Hmm.
Remember?
Yep.
And that was perceived as, let's say, a very threatening event to the ruling elite. And before it happened, about 3 months before that, a social unrest was happening in Israel.
Hmm.
It was not, and the Occupy movement was really, let's say copying the ideas and the movement that's happening in Israel. It was amazing, as and there was no really cooperation between those two movements.
Hmm.
And Israel that was the strife for the uh, price of housing, which is now came to ridiculous prices. No one can pay for them, and and the same patterns of rebellion of civilian rebellion went out to people really started to live at the streets in tents, went to the Occupy movement. So it's like as you said, it is a thought form. It's an entity that spreads out.
Correct.
But what we see, what I'm frustrated is people are getting much more aware, but there's no implications. The system is standing up.
Yes, that's a step, because what's happening, there's still, when you look at the portion of the ratio of how many support it and how many are breaking it through, it's still many more support it than there are that wants to change it. However, at the same time, like you've acknowledged and shared, that the system, to a certain level, the realization of how what's missing, and that's coming into the equation now, is what life would be without the current systems. Because as much as we may reject the systems that exist, there's still a level of, oh, I don't know what it's going to be like without it. And then there's this a bit of a fear of the
Oh,
idea
yes.
of chaos, of change,
Mhm.
and the fear of change. Like, there's an analogy, and
Okay.
I don't know if that exists. It's better the devil that you know than the devil you don't know, right? Sort of thing.
Yes. Yes.
And that's just an analogy. So the thing is, I don't want to experiment. I understand this, but I don't want to experiment. Now, some are doing so, but many others are not, saying, well, if the system goes down, if we don't give power to this, what's going to happen? Then you have the other part. For example, let's take the monetary thing for the moment.
Mhm. Yes.
I have people that talk about, oh, I want to abolish the monetary system because it's controlling us and so forth. However, the people that already have some money or have a lot more money
Mhm.
or have possessions, they want to see change, but they don't want theirs disrupted. They still want themselves. Like, for example,
Mhm.
there was people talking about the banking system will crash, okay?
Yes.
And that we will go into a
Me too. Me too.
moneyless, what's that?
Me
Sorry?
too. Me
Yes.
too.
And we'll go into a moneyless society and all this stuff where, we're basically
Mhm.
cooperating, assisting each other and so forth. One of the things I notice with people, they start to react and panic. It's like, oh, what happens to my savings? What happens to my retirement? What happens to all the possessions I have? I don't want to lose any of that. I want the system to go down, but I still want to have that. And there's many like that look at
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. But the trick is to let's say to change from looking at money as security
Correct.
to look as life and cooperation as security,
Correct.
as was with the social cooperation in what was, let's say, 20 years ago, the Israeli kibbutz model, which now dissolves.
Hmm.
that trust in the collective and the social, I would not sharing, um, social support,
Mhm.
the collective support is crucial for advancing and to creating something new.
Correct. Yes.
But this can happen only let's say the way I perceive it. This could happen only on let's say on a collective level of municipality and not on a nation or a planet. But maybe I'm wrong, and maybe we need, let's say, some kind of a planetary event that will unify us. Because it said that Israel is at best when it is in war, because then people are unified.
Correct. Yes. Now, the thing is, too, there's two sides to that, and I will elaborate that in a moment.
Okay. Before the interruption, that I wanted to also to add that Israel is its best when it is war. That's our ethos. But also, as a child brought up in Israel, it was young Israel. I was in the 60s. Uh, I was educated, and also the Arab children now are educated. That we are on the verge of extinction. All our neighbors want to
Distinguish.
exterminate us.
Yeah, exterminate. Yeah.
They want to teach us how to swim. Okay, and and I can identify this fear-based collective entity also within the supposed to be let's say non-receptive, but the Arab population as well. So how can we change this? If we change it, we will change the characteristics of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
And Israel is supposed to be the startup nation, the nation of innovation, and it was attributed, this startup nation, to the Arab boycott. The Arab boycott induced the Israeli people to create whatever they created.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so how we shift from being a struggling nation to being a thriving nation.
Well, one of the things too to realize, like you were saying earlier, that Israel or any other countries, because many other countries are the same, maybe a little bit more accentuated in Israel, that people are better at war than when there's peace or something like that, because it pushes things even further. Uh, the point with that is that's kind of a collective idea that will keep perpetuating fear, perpetuating lower state. I'm going to be extinguished, whatever it is, right? And so what happens in that regards is that that idea is pushed along, and then people adopt it, and see outside of that and say, well, if we're not struggling, we're not going to be creative. But the thing is, too, even being in war, where's it keeping you? It's keeping basically to a point where you're repeating the patterns and you're still keeping in that low vibration. So the realization that that's happening, like you just explained, and more of people coming to that realization, um, it's not even so much flourishing as a nation, it's flourishing as a human species, like the whole thing, and even breaking down the borders and barriers and distinctions, and saying that, you know, one's more better than the other, and more one's right, one's wrong, and all of that stuff, and even going down beyond that. So it's not about extinguishing, like you said. It's more of a, let's flourish and let's be the difference that we are of one another, and also how we can facilitate one another. For example, you go across the border, and now instead of fighting with the idea that the other people on the other side are the enemy.
Mm-hmm.
You see them, there's just another facet of you that's holding on to a certain idea that they want to evolve too, and that how can we better facilitate each other to do so without getting into the fact of ideas of one's an enemy, one's this, one's that, or the fact that we have to, the only way we know, the only thing we know, let's call it that, because this is the thing is too, it's interesting because I had that conversation with some other people some years ago, is like the only thing we know is war. The only thing we know, like you take the industrial complexes, the systems that are there,
Mm-hmm.
how much of it is based, and the economy and everything else is based on war, based on,
Competition,
yeah,
basically competition.
yeah. Well, World War is another competition because who has better toys and better
Mm-hmm.
weaponry, who can wipe out whoever, you know, and all of that
Mm-hmm.
stuff. So you take the souls that have never been on the planet, they come here and they go, whoa, what's that interesting? Or even the beings say,
Mm-hmm.
what? You realize that you're killing each other, your other aspects of each other, but not only that, you're destroying the environment that actually supports all of us here, you know, type of thing. But besides that sidetrack, when you're looking at that whole competition and so forth, saying, well, I'm better than this and that, and that we have the rights and they don't have the rights, or, you know, we don't share, we don't, whatever. It's still
Mm-hmm.
back into that older, denser frequency. But so the question that you had is how do we start changing that? Is coming to that realization and sharing that realization, and more people by holding that energy within yourself and also sharing it and taking steps in the sense of when you're interacting with other people, you know, there is other options. We don't have to do this and so forth, whatever. Because innately we all know inside, intuitively,
Mm-hmm.
that we're playing the game and we think that the game is only the way it can be played. But intuitive, we know there's more to that. And we almost don't give ourselves permission to explore that. Because as a child,
Yes.
when we come onto the planet, we come here to explore that. We come here to explore our innate essence. And then we're conditioned not to look outside of that. We're conditioned to, oh, you can't explore. You cannot go and be outside the box. You got to be like one of us, sort of thing,
Yes.
because this is the
Assimilate.
way it works.
Yes. Yes.
You know,
Yes.
you can't be born in Israel and or be from a Jewish descent or any other descent. I'm just giving you that as an example, and not buy into or support the Jewish religion or what that mandates. So you
Mm-hmm.
have a child, you have a soul that comes in that has never had a Jewish experience, has come from more of a expanded perspective, and may
Mm-hmm.
have even be coming here for the first time, or have come here only a few times a long time ago, and for them to buy into a religious practice and a whole national idea of it. Because the one thing about what I find with Judaism, it's not only a religion, it's a culture too. It's all one.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
most places you have a culture, then a religion. They're kind of separate, but in the Jewish upbringing, it's kind of all one. It's merged. It's like a whole unit. It's
Mm-hmm.
interesting, but it's a great experiment and a great.
It's a culture.
It's a
It's a
culture.
culture, and there is a great price you have to pay if you want to break out.
Yes, yes. So it's a culture, it's a religion, it's and then of course on top of that there is the uniqueness that comes into it, and then all the entities attached to that aspect of it that
Mhm.
support it. So yeah, it is in some ways it's more difficult because you're breaking through two and three and four layers before you can actually free yourself up, and then you're going to have a lot of your playmates that are going to try to put you back in the box anyways. But
Yes,
anyways, when
yes.
you look at all of that,
So it's dangerous, as you said. You said sharing is the key. Sharing is caring, but sharing is also very dangerous because it can be perceived as as it is actually is a change is game changer.
mhm,
Thoughts are game changers.
correct.
thoughts are, let's say, the currency of the creation. And so I believe that I'm more spiritually evolved. I can speak with you. I speak with other people with a like mind. But let's say I go and speak about these issues and ideas to someone, let's say in Egypt. Okay, I might be, let's say, prosecuted as a danger to the state.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep.
So same thing happened, let's say, in Russia, in the Soviet Union. Okay, so the tool for change, let's say, facilitator for change is the internet and the free communication, but that's not enough.
Well, what I was going to
Because
suggest, was for you to take these videos and bring it to the synagogue and have that as part of the Saturday thing.
well, I'm not observant, so I don't go to synagogues.
Yes, I'm only teasing you though. The point is, yeah, you're right. When we're talking about sharing, we're doing that right now. You're making this content available on the internet and so forth. But at the same time, while we're having this conversation, we're already streaming to each and every soul on the planet. We're already
Okay.
creating changes in the collective. And each time we focus on one culture or whatever it is, we're already uploading into their conscious, conscious, what's the word? Conscious, oh, forgotten. Anyways, into their consciousness, I'll use that for now, into their consciousness, this information already, which is starting to create little changes and little things and so forth. So what happens is more and more people, say in Israel, for example, that are, following that particular faith and following the culture and everything else, starts to question things. They start having a dialogue within themselves at first, start questioning things. Their soul starts to branch out a little further, speak out a little bit more, because the mind is not trying to shut it down as hard. It's because you've already caused a little bit of disrupt, including the entities within themselves, the entity.
Mhm.
And so that's what happens in that regard. So you start creating it. So look at what's already occurred within the last 5 to 10 years, even in the last year, in the last 6 months and whatever. There has been so much more awareness coming to the forefront. Maybe not everybody's acting upon it. That's true. But there is more questioning, more dialoguing. There's more self tuning in and discussing with themselves and questioning even their existence, their reality. Is there something better than this? What are we doing here? Do I need to support this or whatever it is? It's similar to yourself, but it's happening with more people. It might seem smaller at first, but it's going to happen, because eventually what happens is more and more, which is the case here, comes to those realizations, starts shifting their thought patterns, and having a lot of the programming and conditioning and all of the suppressional stuff that has come into place starts to fall apart. They start to blossom more, and they start to question more. They start to share with one another. Because, for example, and the sharing is not like the preaching part where you're going in and you're sharing this information or whatever it is. It's like what I was saying earlier in our conversation, where, having the dialogue with a family member, for example, if they're having a challenge in their life, or they're having something they're not understanding, and the opportunity comes where you say, well, something, have you ever tried looking at it this way? Or why do you feel that, you're feeling so passionate about this or so uncomfortable about this? Those questions actually trigger already something that's been going on within themselves. Their own inquiring,
Okay.
their own questioning, and
Okay.
already implants that
Mhm.
are in there, the stuff that is already downloaded in them.
Yeah.
And then they may leave very reflective, but it starts a whole chain of reflection along the way for them. And that all participates in that changes. even the work that many are doing on the back end, you know, creating an alternative, creating an opening, creating or uploading more consciousness and so forth. It's all available in the different consciousness. Like, for example, if you wanted to focus on Israel, okay, just as a focal point,
Mm-hmm.
bring them into your consciousness. Bring in your consciousness the Israelite people and all the. Also, call forth. This is all in your imagination. You go quiet. You imagine. You bring in. You see yourself with them. You call forth all the ones that are already inquiring and questioning, like yourself, that have already made
Mm-hmm.
some movement and that are still living in Israel,
Mm-hmm.
and bring them forth, and then have a conversation with them in your mind. Share information with them. Ask them questions and create that, and also impart the energies and the experiences that you've gained from stepping outside of that box per se, or that
Mm-hmm.
parameter of functionality or thought form
Yes.
or sequence of thought form. And as you do that, you're now having more direct connection to start to stimulate change further. So you could do it globally.
Okay.
You could do it in cultures, but you can do it with your family, but you can also
Okay.
do it with the
Mm-hmm.
with your culture
Mm-hmm.
or part of the world, like Israel, for example.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you. I would just summon to dinner, to the
Okay.
holiday dinner.
Yes.
Now it's the eve of Sukkot, which is the um, festival holiday where the Jews um, feast outside of home in let's say kind of small shacks,
Oh,
like
yes, yes, yes.
tents, to celebrate the going out of the exodus from Egypt. So we have a holiday kind of dinner.
Hmm.
So I wish to conclude this interview. Okay, at this stage, I'm extremely grateful, and I had a great time, and I'm really empowered, and I would say um, strengthened by this talk. I um, I am still finding myself, um, I would say, isolated with my beliefs and my attitudes. But talking to you, it really, I would say,
Excellent.
encourage me to go with my to pursue my direction, and hopefully I will start to also interview and spread those ideas in Hebrew.
Yeah, perfect.
Because most Israelis don't speak, don't hear fluent English.
Right, right.
But so, and I probably will put also translation on subtitles on the conversations.
It's a great
So
idea.
let's conclude now this interview, and greetings. Thank you. You don't
Perfect.
see that my video is frozen. You don't see my expression, but I am very grateful.
Well, I'm
Okay.
grateful for it. Thank
Okay.
you for interviewing and for everything that you've shared and for even asking the questions you ask. And to me, I find it highly beneficial to be able to do this on a collective scale because it's not just us communicating. We're actually uploading into the collective. So it's
Oh,
thank you
thank
for
you.
doing that, for
Thank
participating.
you. Thank you. Thank you. I'm now, I feel privileged. I feel privileged, and I feel contributing with this.
Okay. Well, we'll
Okay.
connect again, and
Okay.
we'll carry on and play some more.
Okay. Thank you.
On with the theme that we briefly covered
Hmm.
regarding the soul and so forth. So I'll let you set the stage, and then we'll get playing.
Thank you, and I'm very grateful for this opportunity. And in the previous interview, we spoke mostly about the soul journey and its facets and some aspect of sovereignty of the soul and whether it is prison planet or not and so forth. And I wish to elaborate on this path and going into the question on the illusion of free will and sovereignty. Are we really sovereign with our soul or our spirit? And the choices we make in life, are these really free will choices and so forth? You've just shared with me the long story of life hopes that you all went around, and I had my own, let's say, path that was really, really, I would say, guided. I'd say, or bounded. I would say guided. It's too harsh. I'd say bounded,
Mm-hmm.
bounded in restricted area and restricted, let's say, career and so forth. So I will start with the question: is this really a mean free will at the say at the soul level or on the personal level?
Yeah, that's a good question because that comes up with a lot for people in regards to the whole thing about free will. How much free will do we actually have? And see, the thing is too, we have different personalities, so we have an agenda that comes from the entity that we bring forth as our part of our human experience. Then we have the part of us that is the mind or the um, how can I say, the intellect aspect that we carry on. And then of course we have the soul path
Mm-hmm.
and so forth. So when somebody asks me, well, do we actually have free will? And the question is, from what level are you asking from? Because just the question alone tells you it's not coming from the highest aspect of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, what do you classify as free will or not? Now, is it what the entity wants, what you want from your programs, belief systems, and so forth, the intelligence that you've gained from your experience, or is it coming from a soul perspective? Now, each one has a certain level of free will. So there is an agreement that that is arranged from all levels. So in fact, it's not like, oh, the soul dictates 100% every part of it, and or the entity or your personality dictates every part of it. Um, from your for journey, it comes from all parts. Now, uh, I tend to find, and which doing this work for so many times and observing people, that the soul actually has the greater accessibility and control structure of what direction to go or not, in essence, because the soul makes many agreements. So let me explain this out. The personality that we adopt as a human, the programming, the belief systems, the conditioning, what we take on from the family genetic codes and the DNA and from our exposure of our culture, religion, or anything else, that kind of creates our program, operating system, that we have on a human perspective, meaning the mind, the logic, what we choose, don't choose, and that's usually stored in our subconscious mind. And we play that role. Now, we of course take on certain characteristics from our family lineage and certain characteristics that go further back than just your parents alone. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so that's on a physical, mental perspective. The
Yes,
next,
but that's yes, but that was also a choice going into that specific genetic lineage
Mhm.
and going to a specific society and so forth. That was also a choice. Is that a free will on the soul level, or is it directed?
No, there's two levels of direction. This is the thing. So the characteristics and so forth at some point was either entity and soul directed, but there's also um, you need to set a base, okay, as you're operating. So your physicality coming from your mom and dad, for example, right?
Hmm.
And you're coming into wherever you were born. And when you're coming into born, you basically at this point in time, there's an agreement from your parents and the souls to bring forth another physicality, which creates a vehicle for a soul to come in, for an entity
Hmm.
to come in, and also to express on a human perspective what they haven't been able to express yet. So there's that other part of it. So is there a free will? Yes. At that point in time in the creation, the free will is less with the physical perspective, but more
Hmm.
from an agreed part from a physical perspective from mom and dad and the lineage following through. It's like this. I can give you an analogy. Say your mom and dad. You come into their life. They want to train you, they want to condition you, they want to shape you, they want to teach you, they
Hmm.
want to share their wisdom, their
Hmm.
reality with you, because on a human perspective, at a mind perspective, they want you to have even a better life than they had or what they felt.
Sure do. Sure do.
Yes. And then you will also see the other part where, say, your mom and dad didn't have certain opportunities in their life because of the circumstances, because of their environment, their upbringing, and
Hmm.
so forth. They're now wanting to see that expressed through you. So, for example, if they wanted to learn a certain talent, like for example, my ex-partner, um, she always wanted to learn how to play an instrument and so forth.
Hmm.
Okay, but she
Yep.
didn't do it. She, for her choices, I mean, she had the opportunity to some degree because of where, but not fully. So when my daughter came along, that's the first thing she wanted to do. Oh, you got to learn how to play an
Mm.
instrument because I never got a chance and I always wanted to, right? So parents do that. Oh, I didn't get the education I had. I want to make sure you get the education because I
Yeah.
can see what life I didn't get or have
Yeah.
because I didn't, for their perspective, didn't
Mm.
feel that I had the same opportunity. So I want to create a different platform and playground for you so that's from a human perspective, from a mind
That's
perspective, from a conditioning perspective, you want to create another environment for your child.
that's projecting
Yes,
the entity wish to the children,
correct.
and this is very dangerous. And
Yes.
and when when I observe it myself, I try to hold up and not to do it.
Mhm. And
I
many
I
more. Go ahead.
I try to refrain from having any kind of path expectations for my children. So I know what I had. I came from a broken family, and my partner came from a broken family, and my parents are Holocaust survivors, and um, we are we are a kind of partially spiritual in the family. No, no, not religious, and I find myself many times preaching to the choir about spirituality, about thoughts, and about souls, and 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 uh, and so forth. And I see eventually that I should not. I should not force my beliefs and my conduct to the younger generation. That's me.
And
That's a common mistake.
yes, but there's two parts to that because the typical default is like what you just described, where you're preaching to the choir, for example, right? The other part is the second part of it, which is um, you allow your children and others around you have their own experience.
Mm-hmm.
However, at some point in time, as you're observing and you're seeing certain patterns and certain things in their life, that you have an understanding that, there's another option, there's another possibility. You can tweak this or just that, and you can have a different experience. You can share that. And that's like, if I look back in my own experience with my children, I didn't project. I didn't want my kids to have, this whole idea. I didn't have this, so they have to have it. Like, I didn't look at that because I know that every child has their own gifts, have their own experience, have their own, agenda, what they
Mm-hmm.
want to do, right?
Right.
However, and I was not in a point of teaching to the choir with them, but I brought in different perspectives for them as they were having certain experiences. So
Mm.
as they were having certain
Mm.
experiences and they bumped into, intensities or drama, whatever it was, I was very open and said, well, there is another option. You can look at it this way or you can look at it that way. And it's up to you, which feels better for you. One's a little bit more dense, more challenging and more dramatic. And the other one is a little bit more, open-minded. We have that option and we're more
Mhm.
than this. And at times they would accept that. At other times they would hear it, but leave it alone and still continue with whatever they were doing. And I left that alone. And then whenever they would go and they would come to me and say, Daddy, why is this happening to me? Well, you're allowing this experience to take place because you're having this experience. However, you can navigate this and look at certain things and decide if you really want to play in that field any
Mhm.
longer or not, or you want to still stick to that choice that you originally made from before. So I would share wisdom, for example, of my experience and my knowing. But I would only do it as, it was beneficial for them or they were asking and inquiring. It wasn't like, oh, sit down, this is how it works. You got to do it this way, this is whatever. There were times of that nature, but it was when they wanted to do it. I say, well, Daddy, I don't understand this. Can you explain this to me? And I would explain it, right? And during the
Mhm.
explanation, I wouldn't just give him the whole, like the whole pot full of stuff. I would give him bits and pieces, and then I ask him, do you understand that part? How could you see this starting to change in your life? If you made this choice versus that choice, how do you see things? So it gave
Mhm.
them an opportunity to learn how to navigate and to understand certain parts. So you can do that part because that's very conducive. I'm not saying that's a requirement, but that's one way rather than, becoming the preacher in your family, preacher with everybody. Because
Mhm.
there are certain people in my family, which is the majority of the family, and when I say brothers, brothers and other extended families and so forth,
Mhm.
they were never interested in any of the stuff that I did at all, you know. So I wouldn't go telling them what to do and whatever. I would just observe, let them have their experience. And sometimes they would look
Mhm.
at me and say, what's your viewpoint? Well, they probably didn't use that word. What's your opinion about this? And I go, well, I'm not
Mhm.
here to put an opinion. However, I also have noticed in life that certain choices, and if you just these choices, that things take a different course, right?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And, oh, okay. And I said, and I used to ask always questions. I go, you're going through all this drama and whatever else that's going on right now, and you feel really uncomfortable about that, and what do you actually focus on? What do you think of? What do you feel coming up for you at times? So it allowed them to look at themselves and so forth. So that would happen time to time, and that's it. And a lot of them have progressed a little bit. Some have progressed a little bit more and others have progressed nothing at all, and that's
Yeah.
okay. you know I've noticed the last couple of so years
Yes.
that some of them are taking bigger leaps and they're actually inquiring more, and I've had people that would totally think that I was a heretic in my teachings because it was not religious based, and they were very religious based, started coming to some of my talks, you know,
Really.
and come and listen. And it's like, wow, there's something else. I mean, they take a bit of it. They don't take the whole thing and change their whole life, but enough to create a shift and bring some peace to them from their own self directed. But I just let them go. And you look at it, I mean, I've been in their life for a long time, in some cases,
Mhm.
many, many decades, right? And that's okay. I'm not there to push it, I'm not here to preach. I do share
Mhm.
with people that want they feel drawn to my work, and that's it. I leave it that way.
Okay.
So that's from a
Okay.
human perspective.
Okay. Let's get back to the question about free will and sovereignty of the soul and sovereignty of the entity. Um, if there is, let's say, a contradiction between the, I would say, ego or personality or entity will and soul will, there are ramification, implication, let's say.
Yes, correct.
Okay. Okay. But I would say as the more, let's say, evolved and spiritually tuned we are, we can feel that there is what's the souls is directing us. Okay. I I'm not in the, I myself, I'm not in the level that I can speak directly with my soul yet. Okay. But I try to interpret it, to interpret signals in my life. Let's say in the 6 months ago, I tried to be a physics teacher and went to a course for certificate for teacher, and I was booted out. And I understood that I have the technical and I have the intelligence and everything, all the skills, but I don't fit on personality wise. Okay, but I had to get this experience and to understand and to follow it and not fight it.
Hmm.
Because I got the message.
Correct.
There are about there were three escalating signals till I was booted out.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's a great example because from an ego perspective, personality aspect, you say, oh, okay, uh, being a teacher, doing this role, has status, has possibility of decent income, gives me opportunity to it creates different stories and ideas of what
Mhm.
that would give you. And so in essence, there's a construct that happens in your mind saying, oh, this is ideal, we're going to go and do that, right? The
No, it's for
entity.
me. For me,
Yeah.
it was much less than ideal because I was unemployed for more than a year,
Mhm.
and I thought, well, my high tech career is over. Let's try to look for another career.
Right, right. Exactly, exactly. And at times it brings us to that scenario, right? And so there's that part. Then, of course, the entity component comes in, and of course, just to paint the basis on the entity, it
Mhm.
comes in. The entity comes in from a collective entity. Okay. Yes, it may have been in another physicality before, but it never comes back exactly the same. That means it either purges
Mhm.
certain characteristics, aspects of it, and purposes of being in a body or attached to a body. But on a collective, there's an overview, what we call a collective overview entity that is
Mhm.
based on the human perspective and because the entity is to evolve the human experience.
Mhm.
Okay. And it's also kind of a directive of, okay, what are we going to do here on a human perspective so that we can actually evolve and grow and learn and become a grander human per se. Okay. It's all
Mhm.
human based. The soul comes in with a whole different directive. The soul comes in and says, okay, we're going to come in, we're going to experience, we're going to have certain levels of agendas, whatever it was, and we want to evolve as a spiritual being, or what we call soul essence or source essence. So it has a different directive. And that directive is not human based, saying, well, I'm coming here to evolve the human experience. I'm coming here to evolve my highest essence of who I am as the creator and player of this playground and any playground, because the soul
Mhm.
itself is not localized in a human perspective. It may take on a human perspective or human physicality or human
Mhm.
characteristics or any of that nature, but it's It's not. It's not limited to solar systems. It's not limited to galaxies. It's not limited to universes. It's not limited to any specific planet or any particular gender or any particular physicality expressions.
But it must be very much interested in other soul, isn't it?
Yes,
And right. So as human, we are social. We grow spiritually the most while interacting with other social humans.
yeah,
Same as souls. We need other souls to evolve with, right?
exactly. And this is where any reason that it comes in, it wants to interact with other souls coming from different perspectives and makes agreements with other souls to participate in, say, relationships or
Mm-hmm.
interactions or whatever it is. Like for even the relationship we have, you and I having this conversation, it's a soul-to-soul agreement saying, okay, great, this will be perfect for us to do that. And because what we're going to be sharing, we learn from each other, but we're also sharing this with a larger group. And it affects other souls, which create other ripple effects from that aspect. So a soul
Okay.
is coming in with its so-called agenda, and it now merges. Now you have to understand, a soul when it comes in, it looks at the many physicalities that are being built or produced or extended, if you want to call it that. It also looks at whatever entities that are going to come into it. It also looks at different parts on the planet, different cultures. It looks at different races. It looks at different genders. It looks at a lot of different um, baseline uh, expressions, experiences, and it decides at that point which physicality, with what entity, it feels that it can accomplish what it wants to do in this lifetime. Okay.
Okay. This is exactly where's the place of free will. Is it really um, free, the soul is really sovereign to decide? Okay, I want these two parents. No, I want those two parents. They are nicer, and and I will gain more with the dramas in that family. Or let's as we human, as we experience, let's say looking and having let's say intimate relationships in our life. Okay, same thing with, I think that should happen with the soul level when it comes. Okay, you should engage with other souls. Say, okay, I want those parents. I don't want those parents. I want, let's say, to live in this part of the world to gain this, let's say, drama, or I want to live in, let's say, very rural area in the world, and so forth and so forth. So I want to be in nature. So there should be some kind of engagement, as let's say we play with dating before getting into relationship
Yes.
for the soul.
Yes.
Some kind of a preliminary acquaintance and exchange before selecting. Okay, you are going to be my parents.
Correct.
And from what I learned, souls are really not having the choice. They're directed. Okay, because let's say in the previous lifetime, you wanted to experience, let's say, envy and forgiveness. Okay, so now I give you this. We give you this family. There will be an abusive case, and you will have the experience. You will have the chance to experience forgiveness and release and so forth. So where is this exchange? My expectation, as I would say, my intelligence is there should be some kind of exchange
There
before making
is.
choices.
Yes, there is. So on a soul level, for example, okay, well, I'll try to put this all together. From a soul level, uh, it says, okay, these are it goes through its list of things that it's experienced, didn't experience, what it wants to experience next, and so forth. It says, okay, these are the things that I need to get done. Now you're having a communication with your oversoul and your soul family. You're having communication with another soul, or that
Mhm.
oversees several other clusters of souls. And it looks, and so you're being supported, and it's like, okay, let's review. It's like you going to, I don't know if they have it in your parts of the world, a guidance counselor sort of thing, where you're going in, say you're in school and you want to choose what career you're going to go in, what direction you're going to go in your life. I know in North America they have what they call guidance counselors. So you go in and sit down with someone with
Mhm.
experience and you say, okay, these are some of the things I would like to do, and so forth. And they will like share with you what you need to do to get that to experience, what potential outcome would be, and so forth. What would be more advantaged for you to do, or what direction, what schools to choose, whatever.
Mhm.
So that occurs too from a soul perspective, saying, okay, you want to get these things done. We also feel that the way things are changing and what we're doing on a collective aspect of it, you may not be able to access all of this, but you can start at a certain point. So there's that framework that is created. Now, with that framework, you're kind of presented with, okay, the opportunity are within these parameters of experiences that you can have that will benefit you to be able to accomplish what you need to accomplish, not only from a direct self-expression, but on a
Mhm.
collective aspect of souls that are all interconnected. So say your whole soul family cluster
Mhm.
says, okay, you're going on to planet Earth. We've been there, and probably a lot of them have not. We can't have the same experience you have because the playground is different, the energies are different, the dimensions are different. So
Mhm.
these are some areas that we need to expand. These are some of the areas, and going there to planet Earth, you will be able to do that because the platform is very staged for that. It's very conducive for that. So you do, as a soul, individual soul, even though we call it individual, it's still from the
Mhm.
cluster, will come in and say, okay, I'll go there, and these are some of the things to do. Now, the next part comes in. A soul says, okay, these are some of the families that I can choose. But a soul will not enter, say, for example, your soul would not go into your mom and dad's reality and experience without having a conversation, a negotiation, a review of what each can benefit from it, what service they can provide for one another before any final selection is made. So your soul communicated with your mom and said, okay, this is what I'm coming in. This is my agenda. This is what I want to
Mhm.
accomplish. You have the staging for it. You have the lineage background. You can do all of this stuff within here. And you will do the same thing with your father. Soul. But at the same time, you will also ask, what can I do for you? What are some of the things that I can bring to the experience that will help
Mhm.
you, that you are is on your list of experiences that you want to address?
Mhm.
Um, so you can ask that part. And so that part comes into play. So we look at that aspect of it and says, okay, your mom will say, I need this done, and this is how I can experience it and learn from it. So can you play this particular role? Can you direct in this way? And I will direct in this way that will serve you. You will serve me. Same thing with dad. Now,
Mhm.
when your brothers and sisters come along, if there are any, or any other family, you will have some interaction with certain families too. For example, if you have an uncle or an aunt or, you know, whoever, I'm just a cousin or
Mhm.
whatever, the level of interactions they will have with you, or even the duration and what roles are played, is still, there's a communication. So it's not just like parents, you're going to have that. Say you're the first child, then any soul that comes in after that as
Mhm.
brother or sister will have those communication because they're not only looking at mom and dad, they're looking at you because you're here first. Now, for example, if we, and then it says, okay, I'm going to be your brother, for example, and
Mhm.
because your mom and dad is producing another physicality, what can I do for you, and what can you do for me? And so there's that discussion. But say you're not the first one; you already have two brothers and sisters. Then your communication is not only with mom and dad, not only with their extended family, but all this the potential
Mhm.
siblings that come into the play. So there's a lot of discussion, negotiation, whatever it is that takes place before a soul takes on a physicality. So,
Can you give yes, sorry. Can you give an example for a failed date where a soul will say, "Okay, I prefer not to go with these two parents," and
okay,
picking a
the soul at that point in time um, will not be pushed to take on one particular um, path with certain parents and so forth, uh, outside of what it wants to agree upon. It will be persuaded, it will be negotiated, it will be framed in a certain way, but it still has an ultimate choice if it goes that way or not. Now, there are going to be choices, and I'm going to throw this in. It gets complicated, but it's not. There are choices where the soul says, yes, I understand everything, but I want to go here. I want those parents because I feel that those parents are better for me. And
well,
even
maybe
though,
it's not the parent. Maybe it's the environment, and there was a soulmate in let's say in that environment in that area country
mhm,
that he wants to go there. There's nothing to do with the parents.
right.
It's right.
Yeah, it can do that.
But this is the sovereignty of 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 the soul, and if it insists, can it be pushed? Can it be coerced into a certain life? I believe that people, let's say, in very horrible states, are where they are herded as a sheep, are not not really chose those experience, not because they are horrible, because they have no choices over there.